Millionaire was paralyzed when he discovered what his cleaner did to his 7-year-old son. The first ray of sunlight pierced through the towering windows of Anderson Manor, casting long shadows across marble floors worth millions. Inside, Sarah Mitchell's heart stopped as she discovered something that would change everything. In her trembling hands, she held a weathered photograph and a sealed letter evidence that would shatter the walls of privilege and prejudice. But before she could process its meaning, angry footsteps echoed through the hallway. Michael Anderson, the billionaire owner, stood frozen at the doorway, his cold eyes fixed on the secrets from his past that she had uncovered. Before we begin this touching story, please take a moment to let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to join our storytelling community. Sarah Mitchell stood before her classroom one last time, gently touching the colorful alphabet charts she had handmade 5 years ago. At 32, she never imagined her teaching career would end like this, wrongfully dismissed for exposing corruption at Riverside Elementary. The memory of that day still haunted her, discovering financial documents showing the principal and board members embezzling funds meant for special needs programs, reporting it to the authorities, and then facing swift retaliation. Her colleagues, once friends, turned their backs as false accusations of negligence were manufactured against her. The same people who had praised her dedication now whispered about her unstable behavior and inappropriate conduct. The investigation she triggered revealed millions in stolen funds, but the powerful figures behind the scheme ensured she paid the price for her integrity. Sarah's life had always been about nurturing children. Growing up in a modest home with a single mother who worked multiple jobs, she understood early on how education could change lives. She put herself through college, working nights as a waitress, determined to become the kind of teacher she wished she'd had during her own challenging childhood. For 8 years, she had been that teacher. Her classroom was a haven of creativity and understanding, where children from all backgrounds felt valued. Parents requested her class specifically, knowing she would go the extra mile for their children. She spent her own money on supplies, stayed late to help struggling students, and created innovative programs to engage every child. The wrongful dismissal didn't just cost her a job, it destroyed her reputation in the education community. No school would touch her application, despite her stellar teaching record. The financial strain forced her to sell her small apartment and move into a tiny rental. Her savings dwindled as legal fees mounted in her futile fight to clear her name. Yet Sarah refused to let bitterness take root. Her mother had taught her that true strength lay in maintaining dignity through adversity. She took whatever work she could find, tutoring children from working-class families who couldn't afford expensive learning centers. The joy in their eyes when they finally understood a difficult concept reminded her why she became a teacher in the first place. When she saw the housekeeping position advertised for Anderson Manor, she swallowed her pride. The salary was generous, and she needed stability. What she didn't expect was how the massive estate would remind her of everything she'd lost. The family's wealth could have funded dozens of special needs programs at schools like Riverside, but she couldn't afford to dwell on such thoughts. She had her own child to support. Josh, her 7-year-old son, was her reason for persevering. His father had passed away in a construction accident when Josh was just 2, leaving Sarah to raise him alone. Despite their struggles, she made sure he never felt deprived of love. Their small apartment might lack luxury, but it overflowed with laughter, stories, and shared dreams. As she prepared for her first day at Anderson Manor, Sarah stood before her mirror, adjusting her simple uniform. Her reflection showed a woman changed by adversity, but not broken by it. Her warm brown eyes still held their kindness, though shadows of past pain lingered. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back practically, but a few stubborn strands escaped, softening her face, a reminder that some things couldn't be perfectly contained. She touched the locket containing a photo of Josh, drawing strength from it. This job was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild their lives. She had learned the hard way that justice didn't always prevail, that good intentions didn't guarantee good outcomes. But she had also learned that hope, like the flowers she and Josh grew on their tiny balcony, could bloom in the most unlikely places. Little did Sarah know that stepping into Anderson Manor would set in motion events that would challenge everything she believed about justice, love, and second chances. The mansion's imposing gates held secrets that would intertwine her fate with that of its residents in ways she could never have imagined. Her past, which she worked so hard to move beyond, was about to collide with a future she never dared to dream possible. Michael Anderson stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, his reflection ghosted against the backdrop of his vast estate. At 42, he had built an empire worth billions, but the emptiness of Anderson Manor echoed the void in his heart. 5 years had passed since Emily's death, yet her absence still haunted every corner of the mansion they once shared. The business world knew him as the ruthless CEO of Anderson Technologies, a man who had transformed his father's struggling company into a global powerhouse. His cold demeanor and unyielding standards had earned him the nickname the Ice King. Few knew that his hardened exterior was a fortress built from grief, constructed brick by brick since the night he lost Emily. They had met in college. She was an art student from a middle-class family. He was the privileged heir apparent. Emily had seen through his carefully constructed facade, challenging him to be more than just his family name. Their marriage scandalized Boston's elite society, but Michael had never cared. Emily's warmth and authenticity had been his anchor in the cutthroat world of corporate politics. The memory of that rainy October night still tortured him. He should have been with her, but a crucial business meeting had kept him at the office. Emily had insisted on driving to her sister's house alone, not wanting to disrupt his work. The call from the hospital came at midnight. A drunk driver had crossed the median. By the time Michael arrived, she was gone. Nathan, their son, was only 2 when his mother died. In his grief, Michael had thrown himself into work, believing that securing his son's future was the best way to honor Emily's memory. He hired the best nannies, enrolled Nathan in exclusive schools, and provided every material comfort possible. But money couldn't buy what Nathan truly needed: the warmth and love that had died with Emily. Victoria Hayes, the head housekeeper who had served the Anderson family for 20 years, became Nathan's primary caregiver. She ran the household with military precision, maintaining the pristine order that Michael craved in his chaos of emotions. Her devotion to the family was unquestionable, though her methods of maintaining control often bordered on ruthless. Michael watched his son grow increasingly withdrawn, a shadow of the joyful child he had been during Emily's lifetime. The resemblance to his late wife was sometimes unbearable. Nathan had her gentle eyes and quiet sensitivity. Every time the boy asked about his mother, Michael felt his carefully constructed walls threatening to crumble. The string of nannies and tutors never lasted long. Victoria always found fault with them, citing various infractions against her exacting standards. Michael trusted her judgment, remembering how she had practically raised him after his own mother's early death. The mansion's staff feared her authority almost as much as they feared Michael's. Years of isolation had taken their toll. Michael's business associates whispered about his reclusiveness, his inability to attend social functions where couples were expected. The board members gently suggested he consider remarrying, if only to provide stability for Nathan. But the thought of replacing Emily felt like betrayal. Instead, he built his walls higher, keeping the world at arm's length. Now, as he stood in his study reviewing Sarah Mitchell's employment application, something about her reference to being wrongfully dismissed caught his attention. Victoria had recommended hiring her, noting her desperate circumstances would ensure loyalty. Michael had learned that desperate people were often the most reliable. They couldn't afford to make mistakes. Little did he know that Sarah's arrival would force him to confront the emotions he'd locked away for 5 years. The secrets buried in his past were about to resurface, threatening the carefully ordered world he had built from the ashes of his grief. The walls he had constructed to protect his heart were about to face their greatest test. Nathan Anderson sat alone in his expansive playroom, surrounded by toys that would make any child envious. At 7 years old, he had everything money could buy, yet the room felt more like a museum than a place of joy. His small fingers traced the edge of a framed photograph, the only one he had of his mother, sneaked from his father's study. In it she was laughing, her eyes sparkling with a warmth he barely remembered but desperately missed. Despite his privileged life, Nathan was a lonely child. His days were structured with precision by Victoria, the stern housekeeper who seemed to disapprove of anything resembling chaos or spontaneity. Private tutors came and went, teaching him everything from mathematics to mandatory French, but none stayed long enough to form any real connection. His father, though living under the same roof, felt as distant as the stars he sometimes watched from his bedroom window. The other children at his exclusive private school kept their distance, intimidated by his family name and the imposing security detail that accompanied him everywhere. During recess, he would often stand at the edge of the playground, watching others play with a yearning he couldn't express. Victoria had drilled into him the importance of maintaining proper distance, and Anderson never begs for friendship, she would say. Across town, in a modest apartment building with a small but well-tended community garden, Josh Mitchell's world could not have been more different. The 7-year-old boy's laughter echoed through the narrow hallways as he helped his mother tend to their collection of potted plants on their tiny balcony. Though they had little in terms of material wealth, their home was rich with love and creativity. Josh inherited his mother's resilient spirit and natural empathy. Despite their financial struggles, he never complained about wearing second-hand clothes or missing out on expensive toys. Instead, he found joy in simple pleasures, creating elaborate stories with his small collection of action figures, helping his mother prepare dinner, or reading books borrowed from the public library. The loss of his father was a dim memory, but Sarah had kept him alive through stories and photographs. She taught Josh that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in kindness and courage. His teachers often remarked on his unusual maturity and ability to connect with other children, especially those struggling to fit in. Both boys, though living in vastly different worlds, shared a deep longing for connection. Nathan's perfectly pressed uniforms and expensive toys couldn't fill the emptiness left by his mother's death and father's emotional absence. Josh's worn sneakers and handed-down clothes didn't diminish the wealth of love and understanding his mother provided, though he sometimes wished for a larger family to share it with. When Sarah accepted the position at Anderson Manor, Josh understood it meant seeing less of his mother. With wisdom beyond his years, he helped her prepare for her first day, straightening her uniform collar and giving her a tight hug. "Maybe the little boy there needs a friend too, Mom," he said, somehow sensing there was another child in need of the warmth they shared. Nathan, unaware of the changes coming to his carefully ordered world, spent that same evening watching the sunset from his window seat. Victoria had scolded him earlier for asking about his mother, reminding him that proper young men don't dwell on the past. But as the sky painted itself in shades of pink and gold, he couldn't help wondering if somewhere his mother was watching the same sunset. These two boys, separated by circumstance but united by their age and hidden sorrows, were about to find their lives intertwined in ways that would challenge the barriers of class and privilege. Their innocent perspectives would soon become the lens through which a larger story of love, loss, and redemption would unfold within the walls of Anderson Manor. The morning fog clung to Anderson Manor like a silver veil as Sarah passed through the imposing iron gates. Her sensible shoes clicked against the cobblestone driveway, each step echoing in the pristine silence. The mansion loomed before her, its Georgian architecture a testament to old money and carefully guarded privilege. Sarah clutched her worn leather bag closer, feeling the reassuring weight of Josh's good luck drawing inside. Victoria Hayes stood waiting at the service entrance, her steel grey hair pulled into a severe bun, her black dress crisp and immaculate. Her sharp eyes scanned Sarah from head to toe, lingering disapprovingly on a loose thread at her sleeve. Punctuality is essential at Anderson Manor, she stated, though Sarah had arrived 10 minutes early. Follow me. There are rules to be learned. The tour felt more like a military inspection. Victoria's voice carried the practiced tone of someone who had given this speech countless times, yet still expected each word to be treated as gospel. The family areas are strictly off limits unless you're cleaning them. Mr. Anderson values his privacy above all else. You are to be invisible, present when needed, absent when not. As they moved through the mansion's east wing, Sarah couldn't help but notice the strange emptiness. Despite the priceless artwork and antique furniture, there was something sterile about the space, as if it were a museum rather than a home. Family photographs were conspicuously absent, replaced by abstract paintings that seemed chosen more for their value than any emotional resonance. The young master's wing requires special attention, Victoria continued, leading her up the grand staircase. Nathan's schedule is precise. You'll dust and vacuum while he's at his morning lessons. Under no circumstances are you to interact with him beyond a respectful acknowledgement if he addresses you directly. Her tone carried an underlying warning that Sarah recognized all too well from her days fighting the school board. They passed a partially open door, and Sarah caught a glimpse of a small figure sitting alone in a vast playroom. Nathan Anderson looked up briefly, his eyes meeting hers with a startling intensity before quickly looking away. In that brief moment, Sarah recognized the same loneliness she sometimes saw in her students from troubled homes' children who had everything except what they needed most. Victoria's voice sharpened, noting Sarah's momentary distraction. The cleaning supplies are organized by task and room. Each has its designated place. Deviations from the system will not be tolerated. She opened a closet revealing an arsenal of high-end cleaning products, each bottle labeled and positioned with military precision. The morning passed in a blur of instructions and demonstrations. Sarah's mind catalogued each rule while her heart increasingly ached at the coldness of it all. The mansion's perfection felt suffocating, its silence heavy with unspoken sorrows. Even the sunlight streaming through the towering windows seemed unable to warm the space. Near noon, Sarah was polishing the banister when she heard a sound so out of place it made her pause. A muffled sniffle coming from behind a heavy curtain. Glancing around to ensure Victoria wasn't nearby, she quietly approached. The fabric shifted slightly, revealing Nathan's small form huddled in the window seat. Her heart clenched at the sight of his tear-stained face. Every instinct from her years of teaching urged her to comfort him, but Victoria's warnings rang in her ears. Nathan looked up, panic crossing his features as he realized he'd been discovered. "Please don't tell MS." "Hayes," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm supposed to be at my French lesson." Before Sarah could respond, Victoria's heels clicked on the marble floor. Nathan quickly wiped his eyes and slipped away, leaving Sarah to resume her polishing. But that brief encounter had shifted something inside her. Behind the mansion's perfect facade lay a child crying behind curtains, and no amount of rules or warnings could make her ignore that. As she finished her first day, gathering her belongings to head home to Josh, Sarah knew she faced a choice. She could follow Victoria's rules, maintain the careful distance required, and preserve her desperately needed job. Or she could remember who she was, a teacher who had once risked everything to protect children in need. The mansion's secrets were already calling to her, and Sarah Mitchell had never been good at looking the other way. The next few days at Anderson Manor fell into a careful rhythm, with Sarah methodically learning its routines and secrets. She noticed how Nathan would appear in whatever room she was cleaning, his presence like a silent shadow seeking warmth. Despite Victoria's strict rules, the boy seemed drawn to her, finding excuses to linger nearby as she worked. One quiet afternoon, while dusting the library shelves, Sarah heard the now familiar shuffle of small feet. Nathan stood in the doorway, clutching a book to his chest, his eyes darting nervously toward the hallway. MS. Hayes is at her weekly staff meeting, he said softly, as if sharing a precious secret. She'll be occupied for exactly 43 minutes. Sarah couldn't help but smile at his precise observation. That's quite specific timing, she remarked, continuing her dusting but keeping her movements slower, less focused. Nathan edged closer, his fingers tracing the spine of his book. I time everything, he confided. It helps me know when it's safe to just be. The sadness in his voice broke through her professional reserve. Setting aside her duster, Sarah knelt to his level. What book do you have there? She asked gently. Nathan's face lit up slightly as he showed her a worn copy of The Little Prince. It was my mother's, he whispered. Father doesn't know I have it. MS. Hayes says I shouldn't dwell on things that make me sad. Sarah's heart ached at the familiar story in his hands. You know, she said, keeping her voice casual, my son Josh loves that book too. We read it together sometimes. Nathan's eyes widened with interest. You have a son? Is he my age? The longing in his question was unmistakable. Taking a calculated risk, Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, showing him a recent picture of Josh in their small garden. He just turned 7 last month. Nathan studied the photo intently, particularly the genuine smile on Josh's face. He looks happy, he observed, a note of wonder in his voice. He is most of the time, Sarah answered honestly, though sometimes he misses his father, who passed away when he was very young. Nathan's head snapped up, recognition flooding his features. Like my mother, he breathed, the words carrying years of shared understanding. In that moment, something shifted between them. Nathan sank to the floor beside her, the book open in his lap. Would you read a little? He asked hesitantly. Just until MS. Hayes' meeting ends. Sarah glanced at her watch, knowing she was crossing a line but unable to refuse the plea in his eyes. They sat together in the library's warm afternoon light, Sarah's voice soft as she brought the familiar words to life. Nathan leaned slightly against her arm, his body gradually relaxing as the story unfolded. When she reached the fox's secret about taming and friendship, she felt a small tremor run through him. My mother used to say that too, he murmured. About taking time to make friends. His fingers traced the illustrations with tender care. Sometimes I dream about her, but the dreams are getting fuzzy. MS. Hayes says that's normal, that I should focus on becoming a proper Anderson instead of dwelling on memories. Sarah fought back the surge of anger at Victoria's cold approach to the boy's grief. Nathan, she said carefully, it's okay to remember. It's okay to miss her. The words seemed to unlock something in him, and he turned to her with eyes swimming with tears. Really? Because sometimes it hurts so much and father never wants to talk about her and MS, Hayes says. The distant sound of heels on marble cut through the moment. Nathan quickly wiped his eyes, clutching the book close. 39 minutes, he whispered, managing a small but genuine smile before slipping away through a side door. Sarah resumed her dusting just as Victoria appeared, her suspicious gaze sweeping the room. That evening, as Sarah walked home, she knew she had crossed a crucial boundary. The connection forged with Nathan in those precious minutes couldn't be undone. She thought of Josh waiting at home, probably doing homework at their small kitchen table, surrounded by love despite their modest circumstances. The contrast with Nathan's lonely existence in that grand mansion filled her with determination. Rules or no rules, she couldn't ignore a child in pain. As she had done at Riverside Elementary, she would find a way to help, even if it meant risking everything again. What she didn't know was that this decision would set in motion events that would shake Anderson Manor to its very foundations. It happened during Sarah's 3rd week at Anderson Manor, while cleaning the rarely used East Wing study. Behind an antique desk, she noticed a loose panel in the wooden wainscoting. Her cleaning cloth had caught on it, revealing a small hidden compartment. Inside, she found a dusty leather album and a sealed envelope, both bearing the name Emily. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the album, knowing she was violating several of Victoria's cardinal rules. The first photograph stole her breath, a young woman with Nathan's gentle eyes, laughing as she painted at an easel. More images followed Emily in a simple wedding dress, looking radically different from the formal portrait hanging in the main hall. Emily and Michael at what appeared to be a small art gallery, his face transformed by a genuine smile Sarah had never seen. But it was the last photograph that made her heart stop. There was Emily, clearly pregnant, standing beside another woman who could have been her twin. They were outside a modest suburban home, their arms around each other, both beaming at the camera. On the back, in faded ink, Emily and Grace, my two beautiful daughters, summer 2016. The sealed envelope felt heavy in Sarah's hands. The handwriting on it matched the photo's inscription for Michael to be opened. When you're ready to heal, the paper had yellowed slightly, suggesting it had been waiting for years to deliver its message. Sarah's mind raced. Who was Grace? Why was there no mention of Emily having a sister? And why had these memories been hidden away? A noise in the hallway made her quickly return everything to its hiding place, her heart pounding. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her lips pursed. "Mr. Anderson requires the East Wing study for a meeting tomorrow," she announced. Ensure it's immaculate. Her eyes narrowed, noting Sarah's flushed face. "Is everything all right?" "Just dusty in here," Sarah managed, gesturing with her cleaning cloth. Victoria lingered a moment longer before departing, her heels clicking a suspicious rhythm. That evening, Sarah couldn't shake the images from her mind. The Emily in those photographs was so different from the formal, almost stern portrait that dominated the main staircase. The next day, while cleaning Nathan's room during his lessons, Sarah noticed something she'd missed before. The small photo he kept hidden under his pillow, the one he thought was secret, wasn't taken from his father's study as she'd assumed. It was different, showing Emily in the same casual, joyful state as the hidden album. "That's my favorite picture of her," Nathan's voice startled her. He stood in the doorway, having returned early from his lesson. Instead of apologizing for touching his things, Sarah made a decision. "She looks very happy there," she said softly. "Like she's laughing at a good joke." Nathan approached cautiously. "It was taken at Aunt Grace's house," he said, then immediately clapped his hand over his mouth, eyes wide with fear. "I'm not supposed to talk about Aunt Grace. MS. Hayes says it upsets Father too much." Sarah's mind raced. The sister in the photograph could Nathan no more. But the boy was already retreating into himself, shame and fear replacing his momentary openness. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Please don't tell MS. Hayes I mentioned her." Before Sarah could respond, Victoria's voice rang out from the hallway. "Nathan." "You're expected in the music room." The boy fled, leaving Sarah with more questions than answers. That night she lay awake in her small apartment, long after Josh had gone to bed, thinking about the hidden album and Nathan's forbidden aunt. Something wasn't right at Anderson Manor. The hidden photographs, the sealed letter, the sister no one mentioned, it all pointed to a deeper mystery than just a family's grief. Sarah thought of Emily's smiling face in those casual snapshots, so full of life and love. What had happened to create such a wall of silence around her memory? As she finally drifted off to sleep, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled upon something significant. The real Emily Anderson seemed to have been a very different woman from the one Victoria's carefully curated narrative presented. And somewhere out there was a sister, Grace, who might hold answers to questions Sarah hadn't even formed yet. What she didn't know was that her discovery would soon force long-buried truths to the surface, threatening not only her position at Anderson Manor but also the carefully constructed walls Michael had built around his heart. The hidden album was just the first thread in a tapestry of secrets that, once pulled, would unravel everything. If you are enjoying this emotional and heartfelt story about love, family, and redemption, please take a moment to give this video a like. Your engagement helps us share more meaningful stories like this with others. As autumn settled over Anderson Manor, Sarah and Nathan developed an unspoken routine that defied Victoria's strict rules. Their interactions were carefully timed brief moments during Nathan's walks between lessons, quiet exchanges while Sarah cleaned his room, and precious minutes stolen in the library during Victoria's predictable staff meetings. It began with small gestures. Sarah would leave origami animals, crafted from spare paper, tucked into corners where Nathan would find them. The boy started leaving his own messages, simple drawings and notes hidden inside books he knew she would dust. Each secret exchange strengthened their connection, giving Nathan something he desperately craved: genuine attention. One rainy afternoon, Sarah found Nathan hiding in the window seat of the East Wing, tears silently streaming down his face. His piano instructor had scolded him harshly for a minor mistake, and Victoria had dismissed his distress with her usual cold efficiency. Without hesitation, Sarah sat beside him, breaking every rule about maintaining distance. "When I was teaching," she whispered, "keeping watch for Victoria, I had a special way to help children feel better on hard days." She pulled out a small coin, a trick she'd learned during her teaching days. Nathan watched, transfixed, as she made it disappear and reappear behind his ear. His tears gave way to wonder, then to soft giggles that warmed the chilly room. Their friendship deepened through these stolen moments. Sarah taught him simple games she played with Josh, shared stories about her teaching days, and most importantly, listened when he talked about his mother. Unlike Victoria, who shut down any mention of Emily, Sarah encouraged Nathan to keep his memories alive. Mum used to make funny voices when she read stories, Nathan confided one day while Sarah organized his bookshelf. She could make all the characters sound different. His eyes lit up with the memory, then dimmed. Father got rid of most of her books after she left, but I saved some under my mattress. Sarah's heart ached at his use of left instead of died, a child's way of keeping hope alive. She shared stories about Josh's father, helping Nathan understand he wasn't alone in his loss. Their conversations, though brief, created a space where grief could exist without shame, where memories were treasured rather than suppressed. The transformation in Nathan became subtle but noticeable. He began holding his head higher, laughing more freely when he thought it was safe. His tutors reported improvement in his studies, though they attributed it to their own methods rather than the newfound joy in his life. Even Michael, during his rare appearances, noticed something different about his son. Sarah knew she was taking risks. Victoria's suspicious glances grew more frequent, her unexpected appearances more common, but watching Nathan bloom was worth every moment of anxiety. He reminded her so much of her former students, particularly those who had needed more than just academic guidance. One day, Nathan shyly showed her a secret project, a scrapbook he'd been creating with bits of paper, drawings, and the few photographs of his mother he'd managed to save. "Do you think she'd like it?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah's answer came from her heart. "She would love it, Nathan. She would love that you remember her with so much joy." The moment was interrupted by Victoria's arrival, but the bond had grown stronger. Nathan began finding ways to share more of himself with Sarah, and she carefully nurtured his trust while trying to maintain the professional distance required for her position. What Sarah didn't realize was that their growing connection was about to catalyze a chain of events that would shake Anderson Manor to its foundations. Her simple acts of kindness, meant to help a lonely child, were awakening questions that had long been buried beneath the mansion's polished surface. As autumn deepened into winter, Sarah knew she had crossed a line from which there was no return. She had become more than just a housekeeper. To Nathan, she had become a lifeline to the warmth and understanding he desperately needed. The risks were enormous, but every smile, every moment of genuine connection, convinced her she was doing the right thing. What she couldn't know was that forces were already in motion to sever this bond, and that her presence in Nathan's life would soon face its greatest test. Victoria Hayes stood in her private office, meticulously reviewing the security footage from the mansion's hidden cameras. Her thin lips pressed into an even tighter line as she watched Sarah and Nathan's interactions unfold on the screen. 20 years of maintaining order in Anderson Manor had taught her that attachment led to chaos, and chaos threatened everything she had built. The changes in Nathan hadn't escaped her notice. His newfound confidence, the occasional defiance in his eyes when she enforced the rules, the way he seemed to brighten whenever Sarah was nearby, it all spelled danger. Victoria had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let a mere housekeeper disrupt the careful structure she had created. Proper boundaries must be maintained, she muttered, organizing a thick file of notes on Sarah Mitchell. The background check she had initially conducted had been thorough, but now she dug deeper. The scandal at Riverside Elementary particularly interested her. A teacher fired for making accusations against her superiors. Victoria smiled coldly, recognizing a useful pattern. She began orchestrating accidental encounters between Sarah and Michael Anderson, ensuring he would notice the inappropriate familiarity growing between the housekeeper and his son. A casual comment here, a carefully timed observation there, seeds of doubt planted with surgical precision. "Mr. Anderson," she would say, her voice heavy with concern, "I couldn't help but notice young Nathan seems quite attached to the new staff." Her most valuable ally was Nathan's schedule. She began rearranging his lessons, cutting short the precious minutes he had previously found with Sarah. The boy's tutors, long accustomed to Victoria's authority, readily agreed to report any interactions they witnessed. Money changed hands quietly, ensuring their loyalty. But Victoria's greatest weapon was her knowledge of the Anderson family's past. She alone knew the full story of Emily's death, the truth about Grace, and the contents of that hidden letter. For years she had protected these secrets, understanding that they were the foundation of her power within the household. Late at night she would sit at her desk, plotting each move like a chess master. The photograph she had discovered in Nathan's room, Emily with her sister Grace, had nearly triggered a crisis. Victoria had quickly confiscated it, adding it to her collection of leverage. The boy's tears meant nothing compared to maintaining order. Her relationship with Michael was complex, built on years of shared history and carefully cultivated dependence. She had been there when his own mother died, helped raise him, and later managed his household through Emily's death. Her position was more than just employment, it was ownership of the Anderson family's darker truths. "Sarah Mitchell," she whispered, studying the woman's employment file, "you have no idea what you're walking into." Victoria had eliminated other threats before: nannies who grew too close, staff who asked too many questions. Each time, she had protected the family's reputation while strengthening her own position. She began laying traps, subtle but effective. Important items would go missing from Michael's study, only to be found in Sarah's cleaning cart. Small amounts of money disappeared from Nathan's room, creating a pattern of suspicion. Victoria kept meticulous records of every orchestrated incident, building a case for when she needed it. The final piece of her plan involved Emily's sister Grace. Victoria had maintained the illusion of Grace's estrangement for years, intercepting letters and hiding evidence of her attempts to contact Nathan. Now she would use this history to her advantage. An anonymous note here, a manufactured piece of evidence there, all suggesting that Sarah was somehow connected to Grace's attempts to disrupt the family. What Victoria hadn't counted on was the depth of the bond already formed between Sarah and Nathan. Each attempt to separate them seemed to strengthen their connection. The boy showed a resilience she hadn't expected, a quiet defiance that reminded her uncomfortably of his mother. As she watched them through the security monitors, Victoria felt something she rarely experienced: uncertainty. Sarah Mitchell wasn't like the others she had removed. There was a quiet strength about her, an integrity that wouldn't be easily undermined by typical schemes. No matter, Victoria said to herself, straightening her impeccable jacket. Everyone has a breaking point. She had invested too much in maintaining control of Anderson Manor to let one sympathetic housekeeper destroy it all. The mansion's secrets were her power, and she would protect them at any cost. What Victoria didn't realize was that her carefully constructed web of control was about to face its greatest challenge. The very secrets she had buried so carefully were stirring, threatening to rise to the surface and expose not just the Anderson family's past, but her own role in its darkest moments. Michael Anderson stood in the shadows of his study, watching through the window as Nathan walked through the garden with Sarah. His son's laughter, a sound so rare it seemed almost foreign, drifted up through the glass. The scene stirred something in him, a mixture of jealousy, longing, and an unsettling recognition he couldn't quite place. Victoria's reports about Sarah's growing influence over Nathan had initially seemed like routine staff concerns, but now, witnessing the easy affection between them, Michael felt the careful walls he'd built around his emotions beginning to crack. The way Sarah listened to Nathan, her gentle responses to his animated chatter, echoed memories of Emily that he'd fought hard to suppress. "She's overstepping her boundaries," Victoria had warned earlier that week, her voice heavy with implications. The boys becoming dependent on her attention. Yet watching them now, Michael couldn't help but notice how alive Nathan seemed, so different from the quiet, withdrawn child who usually haunted the mansion's halls. Late at night, reviewing security footage Victoria had thoughtfully provided, Michael found himself focusing not on Sarah's supposed infractions, but on the way she reminded him of Emily. The same natural warmth, the unguarded smile, even the way she touched Nathan's shoulder in comfort. It was like seeing a ghost walk through his carefully ordered world. During their brief encounters, Sarah challenged his expectations. Unlike other staff who cowered under his cold demeanor, she met his gaze with quiet confidence. When he questioned her about Nathan's schedule changes, she spoke with the clarity of someone who understood children's needs, not just their obligations. Her words stirred memories of Emily's frequent arguments about balancing Nathan's childhood with his future responsibilities. The mansion felt different with Sarah's presence. Small changes appeared: fresh flowers in forgotten corners, windows left open to catch the breeze, the sound of spontaneous laughter. These disruptions to the mansion's careful order both irritated and fascinated him. They were reminders of a time when Anderson Manor had been more than just an elegant mausoleum to his grief. One evening, passing Nathan's room, Michael heard something that stopped him in his tracks. Sarah was reading aloud the same book Emily used to read, complete with different voices for each character. Through the partially open door, he saw Nathan curled up, completely engrossed, wearing an expression of pure joy that was painfully familiar. The scene should have angered him. It violated every rule Victoria had established about staff-family boundaries. Instead, Michael found himself rooted to the spot, transported back to evenings when Emily would read to Nathan, their shared laughter echoing through the halls. The memory, usually so carefully buried, surfaced with unexpected clarity. Victoria's voice cut through his reverie. "Mr. Anderson, shall I remind Mrs. Mitchell about the rules regarding personal interaction with the young master?" The warmth of the moment shattered. Michael straightened, retreating behind his usual mask of authority. "No, Victoria, I'll handle this matter personally." But he didn't. Each time he resolved to confront Sarah about maintaining proper distance, something held him back. Perhaps it was the way Nathan had begun looking him in the eye again, or the small details he suddenly noticed: his son's improved grades, the drawings appearing on his desk, the hesitant questions about Emily that had been forbidden for so long. In his private moments, Michael found himself increasingly drawn to observing Sarah. Her interactions with the staff, her careful attention to detail, the gentle way she handled the family photographs during cleaning, everything about her seemed to radiate an authenticity that both attracted and unsettled him. Dreams of Emily, long suppressed by sleeping pills and exhausting work schedules, began returning. But now they were different. Emily's face would blur into Sarah's, both women looking at him with the same expression of understanding and challenge. He would wake feeling both disturbed and strangely hopeful, emotions he had no framework for handling. Victoria watched his internal struggle with growing concern. Her reports about Sarah became more frequent, more pointed, yet Michael found himself defending the housekeeper's presence with increasing conviction. "Nathan needs stability right now," he would say, ignoring Victoria's tightening expression. "His academic performance has improved significantly." What Michael couldn't admit, even to himself, was that Sarah Mitchell had begun to wake something he had thought long dead: the ability to feel, to care, to remember without crippling pain. It terrified and attracted him in equal measure, like standing at the edge of an abyss and feeling the urge to jump. Victoria Hayes sat in her dimly lit office well past midnight, meticulously arranging the pieces of her carefully crafted scheme. Spread before her on the polished mahogany desk lay the fruits of weeks of calculated surveillance, doctored photographs, manipulated security footage, and a series of suspicious emails she had manufactured between Sarah and an anonymous account supposedly belonging to Grace Anderson. Her first move had been subtle: a missing cufflink from Michael's collection, platinum with Emily's initials, discovered in Sarah's cleaning supplies after an anonymous tip. The incident was documented with clinical precision in Victoria's ever-growing file. When questioned, Sarah's genuine confusion only added to the appearance of guilt, exactly as Victoria had planned. Next came the financial discrepancies. Small amounts began disappearing from various household accounts, amounts small enough to go unnoticed initially, but forming a pattern when viewed together. Victoria had years of experience managing the mansion's finances, creating a paper trail that led to Sarah was child's play. Each transaction was carefully backdated, creating the illusion of long-term deception. The most damaging evidence, however, was the series of letters Victoria had forged. Using samples of Grace's handwriting from old correspondence, she crafted messages that suggested a long-standing connection between Sarah and Emily's estranged sister. The letters hinted at a conspiracy to infiltrate the Anderson household, with Sarah acting as Grace's agent to gain access to Nathan. "Your position in the household is secure," one letter read, "carefully aged to appear months old. Continue building trust with Nathan. Once the time is right, we'll proceed with the plan." Victoria smiled coldly as she sealed this letter in an envelope, ready to be discovered. During the next routine room inspection, she had also begun planting seeds of doubt among the staff. Whispered conversations would fall silent when Sarah entered a room. Small items would go missing, only to reappear in suspicious locations near her belongings. The other maids, long accustomed to following Victoria's lead, played their parts perfectly, creating an atmosphere of growing mistrust. The security footage required particular finesse. Victoria spent hours editing together clips that, taken out of context, cast shadows over Sarah's most innocent interactions with Nathan. A comforting hug became suspicious intimacy, a private conversation appeared to be secretive plotting. The timestamps were adjusted just enough to suggest Sarah was spending unauthorized time in restricted areas of the mansion. But Victoria's masterpiece was the document she'd discovered in her decades-old files, Emily's original will, with its shocking revelation about Grace's rights regarding Nathan's custody. This, combined with the manufactured evidence of Sarah's connection to Grace, would be devastating when revealed at the right moment. Victoria had kept this ace hidden for years, waiting for the perfect opportunity to use it. She began leaving selected pieces of evidence where Michael would naturally discover them: a suspicious bank statement in his morning paperwork, a troubling note falling from a book he was reading. Each discovery was calculated to build gradually, creating a picture of mounting concern rather than sudden accusation. The surveillance cameras she had installed in Sarah's workspace captured everything, including the moment Sarah discovered the hidden photograph album. Victoria watched the footage repeatedly, noting how Sarah's expression changed as she looked through the pictures. This genuine reaction would be twisted, presented as evidence of premeditated snooping rather than innocent discovery. What Victoria hadn't anticipated was Sarah's resilience. Despite the mounting pressure, the woman maintained her composure and continued her duties with unwavering dedication. This only fueled Victoria's determination. She had eliminated threats to her position before, but Sarah Mitchell was proving to be a worthy adversary. Late one evening, Victoria made her riskiest move yet. Wearing gloves, she carefully planted one of Emily's personal journals thought to have been lost in the aftermath of her death in Sarah's belongings. The journal contained intimate details about the Anderson family, things only Grace would have known. Its discovery would be the final piece in Victoria's elaborate puzzle. As she closed her office for the night, Victoria reviewed her timeline. Each piece of evidence would be revealed in carefully timed stages, building to an inescapable conclusion. Sarah Mitchell would be exposed not just as a thief and a liar, but as part of a larger conspiracy to undermine the Anderson family's stability. What Victoria didn't realize was that her own obsession with maintaining control was beginning to show cracks. Her usually impeccable attention to detail had slipped in small but significant ways. In her determination to destroy Sarah, she had overlooked the possibility that someone else might be watching her just as carefully. The discovery came on a stormy afternoon when Sarah was cleaning the rarely used music room. A loose floorboard beneath the grand piano caught her attention, not entirely displaced, but just enough to seem irregular in the otherwise perfect mansion. Her cleaning cloth snagged on its edge, and as she knelt to investigate, her heart nearly stopped. Hidden in the small cavity was a cream-colored envelope, sealed with wax bearing the Anderson family crest. The paper had yellowed slightly with age, but the handwriting was clear and elegant to Michael when the truth cannot wait any longer. With all my love, Emily. The date written in the corner was just 3 days before her fatal accident. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the envelope. After her earlier discovery of the photo album, she knew this was another piece of the puzzle that was Emily Anderson's life and death. The weight of the letter suggested multiple pages, and through the fine paper she could make out what appeared to be photographs enclosed within. Thunder crashed outside as Sarah wrestled with her conscience. The last time she had discovered something private, she had carefully returned it, respecting the family's boundaries. But something about this letter felt different, urgent, almost alive with untold secrets. The date haunted her 3 days before Emily's death. What had been so important that Emily felt compelled to write it? Before she could decide what to do, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Sarah quickly tucked the letter into her apron pocket, just as Nathan appeared in the doorway, seeking refuge from the storm. His eyes were wide with fear from the thunder, reminding her so much of the photographs she had seen of his mother at his age. "Can I stay here for a while?" he asked quietly, flinching as another thunderclap shook the windows. "Ms. Hayes says I'm too old to be afraid of storms," but Sarah nodded, understanding the unspoken need for comfort. As Nathan settled beside the piano, she felt the letter burning in her pocket, its secrets somehow connected to this vulnerable child before her. That evening, long after Josh had gone to bed, Sarah sat at her small kitchen table and opened the letter. Her hands shook as she broke the seal, knowing she was crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. The first page fell out, along with several photographs showing Emily and Grace together, their faces alight with shared joy. "My dearest Michael, the letter began, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me, or you finally found the courage to face what we've been avoiding, the truth about Grace, about that night, about everything. It can't stay buried any longer. The weight of these secrets is destroying our family." Sarah read on, her coffee growing cold beside her as Emily's words painted a picture of betrayal, sacrifice, and a love too complex to be silenced by death. Grace hadn't abandoned the family as Victoria claimed. She had been forced away by a web of lies and manipulation, orchestrated by someone they had trusted implicitly. The photographs told their own story: Grace and Emily at art school, their shared dreams of opening a gallery, the silent partner who had promised to fund their venture but whose true motives were far darker. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized Victoria's younger face in the background of several images, watching, always watching. The final pages contained Emily's desperate plea: "Michael, I know how much you depend on Victoria, how she's been like a mother to you since you lost your own. But she's not who you think she is. The accident that killed your mother, it wasn't an accident at all. Grace discovered the truth. And that's why Victoria had to get rid of her. I have proof hidden where Victoria would never think to look. A sudden knock at Sarah's apartment door made her jump, the letters scattering across the table. Her heart pounding, she quickly gathered them up, shoving them back into the envelope. Through the peephole, she saw only an empty hallway, but the sound of retreating footsteps told her someone had been there. Sleep eluded her that night as Emily's words echoed in her mind. The next morning, returning to Anderson Manor, Sarah felt the weight of her knowledge like a physical burden. Every interaction with Victoria now carried new meaning, every casual comment potentially hiding deeper threats. The letter had given her a terrible choice: reveal the truth and risk everything, or remain silent and betray Emily's final wish. As she watched Nathan that morning practicing piano under Victoria's stern supervision, Sarah understood that more than just her job hung in the balance. This was about justice, about a family torn apart by secrets, and about a little boy who deserved to know the truth about his mother and aunt. The atmosphere in Anderson Manor grew increasingly charged in the days following Sarah's discovery of Emily's letter. Each time she encountered Michael, the weight of her knowledge made their interactions crackle with unspoken tension. He would catch her watching him with an expression he couldn't decipher, while she noticed his lingering glances when he thought she wasn't looking. Their first direct confrontation came during one of Nathan's piano recitals. Sarah had been dusting the library when she heard the music stop abruptly, followed by Victoria's sharp criticism. Without thinking, she moved to the music room's doorway, arriving just as Nathan's eyes filled with tears. Michael stood by the window, his back turned, while Victoria berated the boy about proper posture and Anderson standards. Perhaps, Sarah said, her voice quiet but firm, he would play better without an audience criticizing his every move. The room fell silent. Michael turned slowly, his expression a mix of surprise and something else, recognition, perhaps, of words Emily might have spoken. Victoria's face hardened, but before she could respond, Nathan started playing again, his performance noticeably improved without the weight of judgment. Later that evening, Michael found Sarah organizing sheet music in the music room. "You had no right to interfere," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Nathan's education is not your concern." Sarah met his gaze steadily, Emily's letter burning in her thoughts. "With all due respect, Mr. Anderson, Nathan's well-being should be everyone's concern." The tension between them took on new dimensions. Michael began appearing unexpectedly during Sarah's cleaning routine, ostensibly checking on household matters, but really watching her interactions with Nathan. She felt his eyes on her constantly, studying her every movement with an intensity that was both unsettling and somehow familiar. During one such encounter, Nathan was showing Sarah a drawing he'd made of his mother based on the hidden photograph he treasured. Michael entered silently, catching the tender moment as Sarah praised the boy's work. "She's beautiful, Nathan," she was saying. "You've captured her smile perfectly." Michael's sharp intake of breath made them both turn. "That's enough," he said, his voice hoarse. "Nathan, go to your room." But instead of his usual immediate obedience, Nathan clutched his drawing closer. "But Father, Mrs. Mitchell understands. She lets me talk about Mom. She doesn't make me pretend like Mom never existed." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Sarah watched Michael's face transform as his son's words struck home. Pain, guilt, and anger warred in his expression. "Leave us," he commanded Nathan, who reluctantly departed. Once alone, Michael advanced on Sarah, his control slipping. "How dare you presume to understand my family? You're here to clean, nothing more." But Sarah stood her ground. "Your son is drowning in unspoken grief, Mr. Anderson. He needs to remember his mother, to talk about her, to know that missing her is normal." She paused, then added softly, "And I think you need that too." The words hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, his carefully constructed facade cracked, revealing the broken man beneath. "You know nothing about what I need," he whispered, but the anger had drained from his voice, replaced by something raw and vulnerable. Their encounters began to take on a different quality after that. The tension remained, but it was charged with something beyond simple antagonism. Michael found himself seeking her out, manufacturing reasons to be in whatever room she was cleaning. Their conversations, though brief, carried undercurrents of things left unsaid. Sarah felt the change too. Sometimes she would catch him staring at her with an expression of confused recognition, as if seeing Emily's ghost in her movements. The letter's secrets weighed heavily on her, making each interaction a delicate dance between truth and necessary silence. Victoria observed it all with growing alarm. Her reports about Sarah became more frequent and pointed, but Michael's responses grew increasingly dismissive. "She's good for Nathan," he said once, surprising himself as much as Victoria. "He seems happier." The tension finally reached a breaking point one evening when Michael found Sarah in Emily's old art studio, carefully cleaning the dust-covered easel. She had opened the curtains, letting in the sunset's light, and for a moment the scene so perfectly echoed one of his memories of Emily that he couldn't breathe. "You don't belong here," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah turned, sunset painting her hair gold, Emily's letter a constant presence in her mind. Perhaps she replied softly, "I'm exactly where I need to be." Their eyes met, and in that moment both felt the walls between them simultaneously strengthen and begin to crumble. Victoria Hayes paced her office like a caged predator, her usual composure cracking under the strain of watching her carefully constructed world begin to unravel. The security monitors showed Sarah in the main hall, and even through the grainy footage, Victoria could see how the other staff had begun to gravitate toward her natural warmth. This had gone far beyond a simple matter of inappropriate boundaries. Sarah Mitchell had become a threat to everything Victoria had spent decades building. "It ends now," she murmured, retrieving a hidden key from behind a false panel in her desk. The key opened a safe concealed behind an ornate painting containing documents she had collected over 20 years. Insurance, she had always called it evidence of the Anderson family's darkest moments, carefully preserved to maintain her position. Now, these secrets would serve a new purpose. She began with the financial records, meticulously doctored to show discrepancies that coincided with Sarah's employment. Small amounts at first, growing larger, all seemingly traced to the new housekeeper's access codes. Victoria had obtained Sarah's signature from her employment documents, using it to create a paper trail of unauthorized acquisitions. Next came the personal items, pieces of Emily's jewelry that Victoria had secretly kept after her death. These would be discovered in Sarah's belongings, along with letters supposedly linking her to Grace's attempts to claim custody of Nathan. Victoria smiled coldly as she arranged the evidence. The betrayal would appear complete, devastating in its thoroughness. But her masterstroke was the surveillance footage she had manipulated. Weeks of recording Sarah's interactions with Nathan were edited to appear suspicious, intimate moments reframed as calculated manipulation. A comforting hug became sinister when paired with Victoria's carefully crafted narrative about Grace's custody plans. She scheduled a meeting with Michael for the following morning, arranging the evidence in precise order for maximum impact. The financial misconduct would come first. Michael's business instincts would immediately engage. Then the personal betrayals, the stolen jewelry, the secret communications, the manipulated footage of Sarah with Nathan. Finally, the devastating revelation about Grace's involvement. That evening, Victoria orchestrated a series of small incidents designed to unsettle Sarah. Important items disappeared from their usual places, only to appear in her cleaning cart. Whispered conversations stopped abruptly when she entered rooms. The other staff, long trained to follow Victoria's lead, played their parts perfectly, creating an atmosphere of growing suspicion. She saved her cruelest move for last, Using her extensive network of contacts, Victoria arranged for anonymous calls to be made to Sarah's apartment, silent messages that would leave her feeling watched and vulnerable. A single photograph was slipped under Sarah's door, a recent image of Josh walking home from school, taken without their knowledge. The implied threat was clear. What Victoria hadn't anticipated was the strength of the bonds Sarah had formed within the household. When she attempted to plant stolen items in Sarah's locker, one of the younger maids hesitated, her loyalty to Sarah briefly outweighing her fear of Victoria. This small act of resistance was quickly crushed, but it signaled a dangerous shift in the household's power dynamics. The security footage that night captured Victoria moving through the mansion like a ghost, placing the final pieces of her plan. A letter in Emily's handwriting, expertly forged, was slipped into Sarah's cleaning supplies, its contents designed to suggest a long-standing conspiracy. Small drops of Emily's perfume, preserved from years ago, were sprinkled on the paper, adding a devastating touch of authenticity. Her final act was to make an anonymous call to the police, reporting suspicious activity around Nathan's trust fund. The investigation would reveal nothing concrete, but the suggestion of financial impropriety would add weight to her other evidence. Victoria had learned long ago that the appearance of smoke was often more damaging than actual fire. As midnight approached, she stood in her office reviewing her plan one last time. The monitors showed Sarah leaving for the night, unaware that she was walking into a trap that would destroy not just her employment, but her entire future. Victoria felt a familiar surge of satisfaction, the same feeling she had experienced years ago when orchestrating Grace's removal from the family. What she didn't see in her moment of triumph was the small red light blinking in the corner of her own office, a camera she hadn't installed, recording every move of her elaborate scheme. Her certainty of victory had made her careless, and in that carelessness lay the seeds of her own destruction. The morning dawned cold and grey as Victoria implemented the final phase of her plan. She had arranged Nathan's schedule perfectly. His morning tutor would be conveniently delayed, creating an unsupervised window that Sarah, given her protective nature, wouldn't be able to resist filling. It was during this gap that everything would fall apart. Victoria had hired Marcus Reed, a former security guard with a grudge against the Andersons, to play his part. His instructions were precise: create a situation that would expose Sarah's negligence without causing any real harm to Nathan. The boy was to be frightened, not injured, a distinction Victoria had emphasized with cold clarity. The timing was critical. She had ensured Michael would be in his study, positioned to witness what would appear to be Sarah's catastrophic failure to protect his son. The security cameras were adjusted, their angles carefully calculated to capture the most damaging perspective of the impending incident. What Victoria hadn't anticipated was Nathan's growing independence. When the boy found himself alone that morning, instead of waiting in the study as instructed, he decided to seek out Sarah. But his path took him through the mansion's east wing, past the massive windows overlooking the garden where Reed was waiting. Sarah, meanwhile, was fighting her own battle of conscience. Emily's letter weighed heavy in her pocket as she cleaned the morning room, each passing moment increasing her certainty that she needed to tell Michael the truth. The sound of Nathan's footsteps in the hallway drew her attention, but before she could reach him, everything spiraled out of control. Reed, seeing Nathan alone, abandoned the original plan. Instead of the carefully orchestrated near miss, he saw an opportunity for real leverage against the Andersons. The screech of tires on gravel shattered the morning silence as his car accelerated toward the garden wall, where Nathan stood frozen in fear. Sarah's reaction was instantaneous. She lunged through the doorway, reaching Nathan just as the car crashed through the garden's iron fence. They rolled together, Sarah protecting Nathan with her own body as glass and metal exploded around them. The impact sent them sprawling across the gravel path, Sarah maintaining her protective grip even as sharp stones tore at her skin. The chaos that followed was deafening. Security alarms blared, staff members rushed from every direction, and Michael's voice cut through it all as he ran from his study, horror etched on his face. Victoria appeared moments later, her usual composure slipping as she realized how drastically her plan had deviated from its intended course. Nathan, though terrified, was largely unhurt thanks to Sarah's intervention. She, however, lay still on the gravel, blood seeping from cuts on her arms and head. As Michael reached them, Nathan clung to Sarah's unconscious form, sobbing, "Don't let her leave like Mum did. Please don't let her leave." Reed had fled the scene, but in his haste, he left behind crucial evidence, a phone showing recent calls from Victoria's private line. The police, arriving minutes later, would find this connection puzzling, though Victoria's carefully crafted explanation was already prepared. In the chaos, Emily's letter slipped from Sarah's pocket, landing face up on the blood-stained gravel. Michael saw it first, recognizing his late wife's handwriting before Victoria could intercept it. The seeds of doubt, long dormant in his mind, began to sprout as he watched Victoria's desperate attempt to take control of the situation. Nathan's account of the events, given through tears to the responding officers, was devastatingly clear. "Mrs. Mitchell saved me," he repeated, his small voice unwavering. "She saw the car coming and she protected me, just like she always protects me." The simple truth of a child's testimony cut through years of Victoria's carefully constructed narratives. As paramedics worked on Sarah, Michael held his son close, feeling the tremors that ran through the small body. For the first time in years, he found himself facing emotions he couldn't suppress. The sight of Sarah's blood on Nathan's clothes, the echo of his desperate pleas not to lose another mother figure, and the damning evidence of Victoria's involvement all combined to crack the protective shell around his heart. Victoria stood at the periphery, watching her plans crumble as rapidly as the garden wall. The question in Michael's eyes when he looked at her now held a new quality, not just suspicion, but the beginning of understanding. The careful facade she had maintained for decades was starting to show its first, fatal cracks. The hospital corridor buzzed with tense energy as Michael Anderson paced outside the emergency room, his usual composed demeanor shattered. Nathan sat curled in a chair, refusing to let go of Sarah's bloodied sweater, while Victoria hovered nearby, her attempts to maintain control of the situation growing increasingly desperate. "Mr. Anderson," Victoria began, her voice carefully modulated, "perhaps we should take Nathan home. The staff can inform us of any developments." But Nathan's grip on the sweater tightened, his small voice cracking as he spoke. "No, I want to stay with Mrs. Mitchell. She saved me. She saved me like Mum couldn't be saved." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Michael stopped pacing, the full weight of his son's statement hitting him. In that moment, Josh burst through the hospital doors, his young face pale with fear. "Where's my mum? Is she okay?" The sight of the boy, so clearly Sarah's son, added another layer to the already emotionally charged atmosphere. Victoria moved to intercept Josh, but Michael held up his hand, stopping her. "Let him through," he commanded, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. As Josh approached, Nathan reached out instinctively, recognizing in the other boy's fear his own memories of loss. The two children, from such different worlds, drew together in shared anxiety. The doctor's arrival silenced everyone. "Mrs. Mitchell has sustained serious injuries, but she's stable," he announced. "She's asking for her son before Josh could move." Nathan spoke up. "Can I go too?" "Please. She protected me. She's like..." He glanced at his father, then whispered, "She's like Mum." Michael's throat tightened as he watched the two boys enter Sarah's room together. Through the window he could see her bandaged and pale, but alive. The way she immediately reached for both children, offering comfort, despite her own pain, stirred something deep within him, a memory of Emily's same selfless love. Victoria seized this moment to make her final play. "Mr. Anderson, while this is all very touching, there are some matters we need to discuss." The police have questions about Mrs. Mitchell's presence in the restricted area of the property. And there's the matter of these documents I found in her possession." She pulled out a folder, but Michael had finally reached his breaking point. "Enough, Victoria," he said, his voice quiet but filled with years of suppressed anger. "I saw the phone in the car. I know about the calls. And this," he pulled out Emily's letter, now stained with Sarah's blood, "explains far more than you ever intended me to know." The color drained from Victoria's face as she recognized the letter. "Michael, you don't understand. Everything I've done has been to protect this family. Emily was going to destroy everything with her idealistic notions about Grace's rights. She had to be." She stopped abruptly, realizing too late what she had revealed. Michael's face turned to stone. "Had to be what, Victoria?" he asked, his voice dangerous. "Had to be silenced. Like my mother." Like Grace, years of carefully buried suspicions surfaced as he advanced toward her. "How many accidents have you orchestrated in the name of protecting the Anderson family?" The confrontation was interrupted by a commotion from Sarah's room. She had tried to sit up too quickly and collapsed, setting off multiple alarms. Medical staff rushed in as Nathan and Josh were ushered out, both boys crying. Michael found himself holding both children, feeling their shared fear of loss. Through the chaos, Victoria attempted one last manipulation. "Think about the scandal, Michael. Think about what this will do to the Anderson name. I protected you from so much, but Michael was no longer listening." Watching Sarah fight for her life, seeing the love she had freely given his son, understanding finally the true cost of Victoria's protection, it all crystallized into perfect clarity. Security, he called, and two officers who had been waiting discreetly nearby stepped forward. "Please escort Ms. Hayes to meet with the detectives. They'll be very interested in discussing several old accidents." Victoria's mask finally cracked completely as she was led away, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. In Sarah's room, the medical team stabilized her condition. As things calmed, Michael stood at her bedside, Nathan and Josh still clinging to him. Sarah's eyes fluttered open, immediately seeking out the boys. Despite her pain, she smiled, reaching for them with her uninjured arm. "Thank you," Michael whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "For saving my son. For showing him love when I couldn't. For," he glanced at Emily's letter on the bedside table, "for bringing truth back into our lives." Sarah's response was interrupted by Nathan crawling carefully onto her bed, followed by Josh. The two boys curled up on either side of her, their earlier fears giving way to exhausted relief. As Michael watched this makeshift family, he felt the last of his carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. As we delve deeper into this moving story of love, loss, and redemption, we invite you to join our storytelling community. Your subscription supports our mission to share these meaningful narratives that touch hearts and inspire hope. Thank you for being part of this journey. In the days following Sarah's hospitalization, a false sense of normalcy seemed to settle over Anderson Manor. Nathan returned to his routine, though his nightmares about the accident grew increasingly severe. The boy would wake screaming, calling for both his mother and Sarah, the two women becoming intertwined in his traumatized mind. The breaking point came during a particularly violent storm. Nathan, seeking comfort in Sarah's absence, had crept into the East Wing where she used to work. Victoria's arrest had left the household in disarray, and no one noticed the boy's disappearance until it was too late. A crash of thunder sent him running blindly through the darkened corridors, straight through a plate glass window. The emergency room burst into chaos as Nathan was rushed in, his small body eerily still on the stretcher. Michael, who had been at Sarah's bedside discussing Emily's letter, felt his world collapse for the second time in a week. The doctor's words blurred together: severe head trauma, internal bleeding, critical condition, next few hours crucial. Sarah, despite her own injuries, insisted on being wheeled to the pediatric ECU. Josh stayed close to her, his young face grave with understanding beyond his years. They watched through the glass as medical teams worked frantically over Nathan's motionless form, machines beeping out an urgent rhythm that measured the distance between life and death. Michael stood frozen, watching his son fight for life. The parallel to Emily's accident was unbearable. The same hospital, the same helpless waiting, the same terrifying possibility of loss. But this time was different. This time Sarah's hand found his, offering strength even in her own weakness. Josh silently took his other hand, the three of them forming a chain of shared hope and fear. Hours passed in agonizing slowness. Nathan's condition remained critical, each update from the doctors carrying the weight of possibility both for recovery and for devastating loss. Michael found himself praying for the first time since Emily's death, bargaining with any power that would listen to spare his son. The doctors spoke of the next 24 hours being crucial. They used terms like medically induced coma and reducing brain swelling, but all Michael could see was his son, looking impossibly small among the machines keeping him alive. The boy who had already lost so much was now fighting his own battle for survival. Sarah, despite the doctor's protests, refused to return to her room. She sat vigil with Michael, sharing stories about Nathan's secret smiles, his quiet courage, his desperate need for love that mirrored her own son's journey through loss. In those dark hours, the barriers between them dissolved completely, replaced by a shared understanding of what it meant to love a child enough to die or live for them. As Nathan fought for his life in the pediatric ECU, Michael Anderson found himself wandering the hospital corridors at night, haunted by the weight of his failures. Every beep of the medical equipment, every whispered conversation between nurses, took him back to the night he lost Emily. Now, facing the possibility of losing Nathan too, the carefully constructed walls of his grief began to crumble completely. In the quiet hours before dawn, he stood at Nathan's bedside, really seeing his son for the first time in years. The boy's face, peaceful in its induced sleep, bore such a striking resemblance to Emily that it physically hurt to look at him. How many moments had he missed? How many times had he turned away from his son's pain, believing that emotional distance was a form of protection? The evidence against Victoria had opened a floodgate of memories. Emily's letter, now well worn from repeated reading, revealed the extent of his blindness. His trusted advisor had orchestrated not only his wife's death, but had systematically isolated Nathan from love and warmth, all under the guise of maintaining the Anderson family's dignity. Michael had allowed it, even encouraged it, too wrapped up in his own grief to see the damage being done. Sarah's presence in the hospital, despite her own injuries, forced him to confront uncomfortable truths. He watched how naturally she mothered both Josh and Nathan, how her love flowed freely without fear or reservation. It was everything Emily had tried to teach him, everything he had forgotten in his determination to protect himself from further pain. Late one night, he overheard Josh telling Nathan's unconscious form about their shared adventures, their secret games, their dreams of being brothers. The simple innocence of the boy's words stripped away Michael's last defenses. He sank into a chair, tears falling freely for the first time since Emily's death. Years of suppressed emotion poured out as he finally allowed himself to feel the full magnitude of his loss, not just of Emily, but of the years he could have had with his son. The doctors spoke of brain activity, of responses to stimuli, but Michael understood now that his son's healing would require more than medical intervention. Nathan needed what Sarah had instinctively provided: unconditional love, emotional safety, the freedom to remember Emily without guilt. All the things Michael had failed to give him. During one particularly dark night, Michael found himself in the hospital chapel, a place he had avoided during Emily's final hours. This time he wasn't alone. Sarah sat in a back pew, her hospital gown incongruous in the sacred space. Without words, he sat beside her, and together they held the weight of their shared fear for Nathan. "Emily would have liked you," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "She always said Nathan needed more love than I knew how to give Sarah's hand, found his in the darkness, a gesture of understanding rather than romance. "It's never too late to learn," she replied softly, her words carrying the weight of personal experience. The truth of her statement hit him hard. All his wealth, his power, his carefully maintained control, none of it could guarantee Nathan's survival. But perhaps, if given the chance, he could finally become the father his son deserved. The father Emily had always believed he could be. As dawn broke over the hospital, Michael made a silent promise to both his son and his late wife. If Nathan survived, things would be different. The Anderson name would stand for more than just wealth and power. It would represent the love and warmth Emily had always dreamed of sharing. And perhaps, in Sarah and Josh, they could find the family that had been missing for so long. Sarah Mitchell sat by Nathan's hospital bed, her own injuries forgotten in the face of the boy's critical condition. The machines keeping him alive hummed their constant rhythm, a mechanical lullaby that couldn't mask the gravity of the situation. The doctors had approached her privately, explaining that Nathan's condition was deteriorating despite their best efforts. They needed to try an experimental treatment, but it required a guardian's consent, and Michael was temporarily unreachable at an emergency board meeting. The medical forms felt heavy in her hands as she read through them again. The procedure carried significant risks, but waiting could prove fatal. As a former teacher, Sarah had no legal authority to make this decision, yet she was the only one present who could give Nathan a chance at survival. The choice before her was impossible: risk her position, possibly her freedom, by signing as Nathan's guardian, or wait for Michael and potentially lose precious hours. Josh watched his mother from the doorway, understanding in his young eyes. He had seen her make difficult choices before, had watched her stand up for what was right at Riverside Elementary, regardless of the consequences. "Mom," he said softly, "Nathan needs you. Like I needed you when Dad died." His words crystallized everything in her mind. Taking a deep breath, Sarah signed the forms, her signature steady despite knowing she was potentially opening herself to legal consequences. The medical team moved swiftly, preparing Nathan for the procedure. As they wheeled him away, Sarah felt the full weight of what she had done. She had chosen Nathan's life over her own security, just as she had chosen her students' welfare over her career at Riverside. Michael returned to find the pediatric EU in controlled chaos. His initial anger at Sarah's presumption dissolved when the doctors explained how her quick decision had given Nathan his best chance at survival. Looking at her, exhausted but unwavering in her conviction, he saw what Emily had always tried to teach him, that love sometimes meant risking everything. Hours passed in tense waiting. Sarah refused to leave, even when her own doctors advised rest. She sat with Josh curled up beside her, both of them maintaining their vigil despite exhaustion. The boy's presence was a reminder of everything at stake, not just Nathan's life, but the possibility of healing for both families. The procedure's success became evident gradually. Nathan's vital signs stabilized, his brain activity increased, and finally his small hand twitched in response to touch. When his eyes fluttered open for the first time in days, they sought Sarah immediately. "You stayed," he whispered, his voice weak but clear. "Like Mom would have." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of the hospital's legal team, concerned about the unauthorized consent form. Sarah straightened in her wheelchair, ready to face the consequences of her choice. But before they could speak, Michael stepped forward. "Any actions Mrs. Mitchell took were with my full authorization," he stated, his voice carrying the weight of the Anderson name. "She acted as I would have, as Nathan's mother would have." That evening, as Nathan rested more comfortably, Sarah sat alone in the hospital garden, processing everything that had happened. She had risked everything for a child who wasn't hers, driven by the same instinct that had once cost her her teaching career. Yet this time, instead of punishment, her actions had been defended, validated, even praised. Josh found her there, followed closely by Michael. Her son took her hand, while Michael stood nearby, his presence supportive rather than intimidating. "You did what Emily would have done," he said quietly. You loved him enough to risk everything." Sarah looked at her own son, then toward Nathan's room, feeling the threads of their lives intertwining in ways she never could have imagined. The setting sun cast long shadows across the hospital garden as Sarah realized that her sacrifice had not just saved Nathan's life, it had begun to heal wounds far older and deeper than any physical injury. In choosing love over safety, she had shown both Michael and Nathan a path forward from their grief. The call came a month after Nathan's recovery. Victoria Hayes, awaiting trial in custody, had suffered a massive stroke. The doctors gave her hours at most, and she was demanding to see Michael. Against all advice, he went, driven by a need for answers that had haunted him since finding Emily's letter. Victoria lay in the prison hospital wing, her once commanding presence diminished by illness and confinement. When Michael entered, her eyes flickered with recognition, and perhaps, for the first time, genuine remorse. "You need to know," she whispered, her voice weak but urgent. "About Emily, about your mother, about everything." The confession poured out in broken phrases, each word seeming to cost her tremendous effort. It had begun decades ago with Michael's mother, Catherine Anderson. She had discovered Victoria's embezzlement from the family accounts, threatening exposure. "The break lines," Victoria admitted, "I arranged it all. Made it look like an accident, just like with Emily." Michael gripped the bedrail, his knuckles white. Victoria continued, revealing how she had manipulated her way into becoming his guardian, gradually gaining control over the Anderson fortune. When Emily entered his life, Victoria recognized a threat to her power. Emily's questions about the family finances, her closeness to her sister Grace, her plans to change the family's charitable foundation, all of it endangered Victoria's carefully constructed world. Grace figured it out, Victoria gasped, fighting for breath. Emily's accident wasn't meant for her, it was meant for Grace. Emily took her sister's car that night. "Wrong sister died," the words hung in the air like poison. Grace knew. Had proof. "I made sure she disappeared. Threatened her son, your nephew. She left to protect him." Each revelation struck Michael like a physical blow. The nephew he never knew existed. The sister-in-law forced into hiding. The years of manipulation and lies, all orchestrated by the woman he had trusted most. The recent accident, he managed to ask, with Nathan and Sarah. Victoria's face twisted with something like shame. Needed to remove her. She was too much like Emily. Too close to the truth, her breathing became more labored. Marcus Reed hired him, but he went too far, never meant real harm to Nathan. Her last words carried the weight of decades of deception. "Everything, in my office safe, behind the painting, all the proof. Emily was right." As Victoria's monitors began to alarm, she grabbed Michael's arm with surprising strength. "I did it all. For you," she whispered, "to protect." The Anderson name, the irony of her words wasn't lost on Michael as medical staff rushed in. Victoria Hayes died minutes later, taking many secrets with her but leaving behind enough truth to finally begin healing the wounds she had created. In the corridor outside, Michael found Sarah waiting. She had driven him to the prison hospital, understanding his need for closure. Without words, she offered her support as he processed the weight of Victoria's confession. "We need to find Grace," he said finally, "and her son. They're part of our family too." The drive back to Anderson Manor was silent, both Michael and Sarah absorbing the implications of Victoria's final confession. The truth had come at last, but it had taken 3 generations of tragedy to uncover. As they passed through the mansion's gates, Michael looked at the house with new eyes. It was time for the Anderson name to stand for something different, not power or secrets, but the love and openness Emily had always envisioned. The contents of Victoria's office safe revealed decades of carefully preserved secrets. Among the documents, photos, and evidence of Victoria's crimes, Michael found another letter from Emily, dated just days before her death. This one was addressed to Grace, never delivered, containing a warning about Victoria's growing threats and a desperate plan for protecting both families. Sarah stood beside Michael in his study as he read the letter aloud, his voice growing hoarse with emotion. "Dearest Grace." Emily had written, "Victoria knows we've discovered the truth about Catherine's death. I've hidden copies of all the evidence in the music room beneath the floorboards. If anything happens to me, you must protect Nathan. He and Daniel must know they're cousins." The Anderson fortune was meant to serve both families. The letter revealed a deeper connection than anyone had imagined. Emily had been working to reunify the family, planning to use the Anderson wealth to establish a foundation that would benefit both Nathan and Grace's son, Daniel. She had discovered Victoria's years of embezzlement and her role in Catherine Anderson's death, but before she could expose the truth, she had taken that fatal drive in Grace's car. Through her tears, Sarah suddenly made a connection. "Daniel Mitchell," she whispered. "My late husband." His mother was named Grace. Michael's head snapped up, realization dawning in his eyes. They looked at Josh, playing with Nathan in the garden below. The boys' uncanny connection, their instant bond, it all made sense now. They weren't just friends, they were cousins. Grace's final message to Emily included a photo. Michael had never seen both sisters at their art school graduation, their dreams of opening a gallery still bright in their eyes. On the back was written an address in a small coastal town, hundreds of miles away. Or when it's safe, Grace had written, "I'll be waiting." Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled out her own family photos. There was Grace, younger but unmistakable, holding baby Daniel. The same Grace who had helped Sarah through her pregnancy with Josh, who had supported her after Daniel's death, who had disappeared so mysteriously 3 years ago, leaving only a near note asking Sarah to keep Josh safe. The pieces fell together like a complex puzzle finally solved. Victoria's threats had forced Grace into hiding, first from her own family, then from her daughter-in-law and grandson. Sarah had unknowingly married into the family she now served, and Josh, through his father, was a legitimate heir to the Anderson fortune. Michael sat heavily in his chair, watching the two boys playing below. Nathan's laughter, so rare before Sarah entered their lives, now rang out freely. Josh's protective nature toward his cousin, their shared features now so obvious it was as if Emily and Grace's bond had passed naturally to their children, despite all attempts to keep them apart. "We need to find her," Sarah said softly. "Grace needs to know she's safe now. That Victoria can't hurt anyone anymore." Michael nodded, already reaching for his phone. With Victoria's confession and the evidence from the safe, they could finally bring Grace home, reuniting both halves of the family Emily had died trying to protect. Standing in Emily's old art studio, now filled with afternoon light, Michael Anderson faced the full weight of his transformation. The room, untouched since her death, held memories he had once found too painful to confront. Now, watching Nathan and Josh drawing together at Emily's old easel, he understood how wrong he had been to bury the past. The discovery of Josh and Nathan's true relationship had shattered the last of his carefully constructed walls. Every interaction between the boys now carried new meaning: their instant connection, their shared mannerisms, even their matching smiles that so resembled Emily's. Nature had found a way to reunite what Victoria had torn apart. Sarah's presence in their lives was no longer a coincidence, but felt like Emily's final gift. She had the same gentle strength that had first drawn him to Emily, the same unwavering commitment to love over protocol. Through Sarah, he was learning to be the father and man Emily had always believed he could become. The evidence from Victoria's safe had revealed more than just her crimes. It showed Emily's vision for the Anderson legacy. She had dreamed of transforming their wealth into a force for good, starting with an art foundation that would help underprivileged children. The plans she had drafted with Grace showed a deeper understanding of true wealth than Michael had ever possessed. In his private moments, Michael found himself talking to Emily, sharing his regrets and discoveries. "You were right," he would whisper to her portrait. About everything. About Grace, about Nathan's need for love, about what the Anderson name could mean. Each revelation brought both pain and healing, like cleaning an old wound that had never properly healed. The transformation of Anderson Manor was physical as well as emotional. Rooms long closed were open to light and laughter. Emily's artwork returned to the walls, alongside Nathan and Josh's attempts to copy her style. The formal gardens where Victoria had once enforced silence now rang with the sounds of children playing. Most profound was Michael's changing relationship with Nathan. Following Sarah's example, he learned to listen, to comfort, to simply be present. They began spending evenings in the library, sharing stories about Emily, healing together through memories that had once been forbidden. Nathan's nightmares decreased as his father's love grew more evident. One evening, finding the boys asleep surrounded by Emily's old sketchbooks, Michael realized the true meaning of legacy. It wasn't about preserving wealth or status, as Victoria had claimed, but about nurturing the connections that made life worth living. Emily had understood this. Now, through Sarah's influence and Grace's imminent return, he finally understood it too. The reunion with Grace took place on a bright spring morning in Anderson Manor's newly restored garden. She stood hesitantly at the gates, looking much like Emily in the old photographs, her face showing the strain of years in hiding. Behind her, the coastal town where she had taken refuge seemed a lifetime away from the mansion's grandeur. Nathan and Josh burst out of the house first, running toward her with the unrestrained joy of children. Grace knelt to embrace them both, tears flowing freely as she held her grandson and nephew for the first time in years. The boys' chatter overlapped as they competed to tell her everything at once, their excitement breaking through any lingering tension. Sarah approached next, the two women embracing like the family they had unknowingly been all along. "You were taking care of him all this time," Grace whispered, looking at Josh, just as Emily would have wanted. Their shared history took on new meaning. Grace's support during Sarah's pregnancy, her mysterious disappearance, all of it part of Victoria's web of manipulation. Michael's meeting with Grace was more complex, laden with years of misunderstanding and loss. He struggled to find words until Grace simply pulled him into a hug. "Emily would be proud," she said softly, "of all of us for finding our way back to each other." The mention of Emily, rather than causing pain, felt like a blessing on their reunion. The day unfolded like a dream, filled with stories and revelations. Grace shared memories of Emily that Michael had never known, their childhood dreams, their plans for the Art Foundation, their shared hope for a united family. Each story helped rebuild the bridge between past and present, healing wounds that had festered for too long. In Emily's studio, Grace discovered her sister's unfinished paintings, preserved exactly as she had left them. Together, she and Michael decided to complete Emily's vision, establishing the foundation she had planned. The Anderson wealth would finally serve the purpose Emily had intended, creating opportunities for children to discover art and healing through creativity. The boys followed Grace everywhere, fascinated by this living link to their shared history. She taught them to mix colors as Emily had done, sharing family stories that made both Michael and Sarah smile through tears. Nathan's resemblance to Emily became even more apparent through Grace's eyes, while Josh's connection to his father's family emerged in countless small ways. As evening approached, they gathered in the garden where Emily had once painted. Grace produced a package carefully preserved through years of hiding Emily's final artwork, a family portrait she had never finished. In the sketch, the Anderson and Mitchell families were already united, as if Emily had somehow known their paths would eventually converge. The wedding took place in the restored gardens of Anderson Manor, under the same blossoming trees where Emily had once painted. Sarah stood before a mirror in Emily's old studio, now transformed into a bridal suite, while Grace helped adjust her simple but elegant gown. The two women shared a moment of quiet understanding, both feeling Emily's presence in every detail of this day. Nathan and Josh, inseparable in their matching suits, took their roles as ring-bearers with solemn pride. The cousins had spent weeks practicing their walk down the aisle, determined to make everything perfect for their parents. Their shared joy had transformed the mansion from a place of memories into a home filled with new life and hope. Michael waited at the garden altar, surrounded by blooming flowers that Emily had planted years ago. His transformation was evident in every smile, every gentle interaction with the boys, every moment of unguarded emotion. The man who had once hidden behind wealth and protocol now stood openly vulnerable, ready to embrace love again. The ceremony itself was intimate, attended only by those who understood the true significance of this union. Grace stood as Sarah's matron of honor, representing both families' past and future. As the boys presented the rings, their combined families watched two separate stories of loss and resilience merge into one tale of redemption. The vows they exchanged were personal and profound. Michael spoke of learning to love again, of finding courage through Sarah's example. Sarah's words honored both past and present, acknowledging Emily's legacy, while celebrating their new beginning. The boys added their own promises, making the ceremony a true family commitment. During the reception, Grace unveiled her wedding gift, Emily's unfinished family portrait, now completed with loving care. The painting showed not just the past, but the present, two families united by love, rather than divided by tragedy. Seeing it, Michael finally understood that loving Sarah didn't diminish his love for Emily. Instead, it honored her deepest wishes for their family. As evening fell, lanterns lit the garden where Nathan and Josh played among the guests. Their laughter, once so rare in Anderson Manor, now seemed as natural as breathing. The boys had taught their parents that love multiplies rather than divides, that hearts have an infinite capacity to grow. The night ended with a dance under the stars, Michael and Sarah moving to the same melody that had played at his first wedding. But this time, the music carried notes of joy rather than loss, of futures rather than memories. Grace watched them, tears in her eyes, knowing Emily would have celebrated this moment of healing and hope. 1 year after the wedding, Anderson Manor had transformed beyond recognition. The once austere mansion now buzzed with life, its halls echoing with the sounds of family. In Emily's former studio, now the heart of the Emily Anderson Art Foundation, children from all backgrounds discovered the joy of creativity that Emily had always championed. Nathan and Josh, now officially brothers as well as cousins, had become inseparable. Their shared bedroom featured a mural they had painted together under Grace's guidance, mixing Emily's artistic style with their own boundless imagination. The boys had grown stronger through their bond, helping each other heal from past wounds while creating new adventures together. Grace had taken up residence in the East Wing, running the foundation with the same passion Emily had once dreamed of. Her presence brought a completeness to the family that no one had realized was missing. She taught art classes to local children, her gentle guidance reminiscent of her sister's spirit. The gallery they had once planned together finally became reality, showcasing both established artists and young talents discovered through the foundation. Sarah's influence continued to soften the mansion's formal atmosphere. Family dinners became lively affairs, with Michael learning to relax and enjoy the chaos of raising two energetic boys. The security cameras Victoria had installed were replaced with children's artwork, and the strict schedules gave way to spontaneous family adventures. Michael's transformation proved the most profound. He reduced his work hours to spend time with his expanded family, often found in the garden teaching the boys about the flowers Emily had loved. The weight of the Anderson name no longer felt like a burden but a gift to be shared, just as Emily had intended. One particular evening captured the essence of their new life. The family gathered in the garden for a celebration of Emily's birthday. As Nathan and Josh unveiled their joint painting a family portrait that included both present and past, Michael realized that love hadn't just triumphed over tragedy, it had transformed it into something beautiful. Sarah watched her husband and sons, her heart full. The mansion that had once felt like a museum of loss now pulsed with life and possibility. Emily's presence remained, not as a shadow but as a light, guiding them toward the family she had always envisioned. And in the quiet moments when sunset painted the garden in gold, they could almost feel Emily smiling, knowing her final wish had been fulfilled. The Anderson name now stood for love, creativity, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of love, redemption, and family bonds. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel to support our storytelling team. Share this video with your loved ones who might find comfort and hope in this narrative. We'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. What touched you most about Sarah and Michael's story? Would you like to see a sequel exploring Nathan and Josh's journey as they grow up together? Your engagement helps us continue creating meaningful stories that warm hearts and inspire hope.